everyone. You're welcome. It was a good song break there. Thank you for showing up on Saturday morning. Appreciate it. We have a minute just to get started. So.
That's a good one.
I have an older brother.
And where is he coming in here? Where is he staying?
He doesn't want to come here. He has a very successful business.
Okay. How many children?
They adopted a baby boy. They did not have any kids for the long time, and then my sister-in-law had a lot of miscarriages. And then, I think 6 years back, they adopted a baby boy.
That's good too. I mean, you have so much experience.
Yeah, my sister-in-law and I don't get along very well, so I don't go visit. Whenever I go, I don't stay at my brother's place a long time because she doesn't like it.
People coming in the door, we're just going to give it
She's different, so yeah, she doesn't like the in-house visiting or whatever. So my brother comes and stays at my parents' place a lot of times, but yeah. My brother and I were very close growing up, like we were best friends always. We are 3 years apart. But since he got married, it was always like, there was something like, if my brother going to talks, my brother talks to
welcome
me,
everyone. Good morning.
she gets
Good morning. Welcome to our presentation titled Wagile, the best of both worlds. My name is Barbara Jones. Alongside of me is Dave Rowe. We are consultants and program managers for Insight Enterprises, and we're going to be your presenters today. As I was sitting around thinking about hot topics, I kept thinking about how can we stay relevant as project managers. And I thought about hybrid project management, and then I thought, Wagile. That's a funny word for hybrid project management, right? Everybody does it, nobody talks about it. So we have a lot to cover today in this short lightning talk, so let's get started. So, disclaimer, welcome, and it's Saturday, so you've probably seen this. So, as a program manager at Insight Enterprises, I value and take pride in driving change for my Fortune 500 clients. I've been with the same Fortune 500 client for about 3 years now, and I can't really see who they are, but I advocate for women in technology. You can see that that's my daughter, picture of my daughter. She is an engineer, and I found that even though it's been 27 years since she was born, she's facing a lot of the same challenges that I faced early in my career. Challenges with having the confidence to ask for more money, being the only woman, being treated like she's a child by older engineers. So she's my inspiration for advocating for women in technology besides my own personal desire. I do that through mentoring and fundraising. You can see I have an MBA from Purdue University. And recently, over the last year, I found a new passion, which is speaking at these events. Most recently, I spoke at Agile 2024, and I also spoke at Agile and Beyond in Detroit. So I like playing pickleball, hanging out with my family, and cruising. This is me in Alaska. By the way, this is my husband. This morning I'm getting ready. I look in the mirror and I go, oh God, I have a couple gray hairs and a couple wrinkles. And he goes, don't worry, honey, your eyes are good. Okay, and with that, off to Dave.
Hi everybody, I am Dave. I'm the program manager with Barb at Insight Enterprises, and I've also been there 3 years. So I've been a combination of program manager, project manager for over 20 years, got my PMP in 2003. And now I teach Agile Project Management at Northeastern University in Boston. Woo! That's right. And credentials, I have my master's degree from Hofstra University in Industrial Organizational Psychology, PMP, a number of Agile certifications, SAFe, Release Train Engineer. Hobbies, most of my time is spent with my family. I have 2 young kids. I do like to hike. That's a picture of me on the top of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. One of them, I don't remember which one. And I do make wine as a hobby, so I inherited that from my dad, and he got it from his dad. So, agenda, why are we here? We are here to talk about Wagile. So Barb and I will explain some of the key principles of Wagile, hybrid project management, the benefits, why it's so popular. It is extremely popular and growing. We'll talk about hybrid approaches, case studies. We will talk about agile suitability filters. So these will help you decide if you should be agile or hybrid or waterfall. And then overcoming challenges. You will face challenges in the hybrid world, and we hopefully will help you overcome some of them. All right, learning objectives. Well, we've covered most of this. Really, Barb and I just want you to come away embracing hybrid project management. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Barb.
So, how do you like your hot dogs? If you will, and you're able to, please stand up and let's get to know each other. Face one of your neighbors and discuss for the next 60 seconds what toppings you like on your hot dogs.
Get up and face your head.
Just like a hot dog, the basics of project management remain the same, but it's the toppings, whether it be waterfall or agile methodologies, that make this combination custom and tailored to your taste. It's the combination that make hybrid project management deliciously successful. Let's take a bite out of this topic. Can't help myself, sorry guys. Dave's like really quiet, I'm the opposite. So, what is Wagile? I want to take a minute and kind of define it. We hear a lot about waterfall, and we hear a lot about agile, but both of them have pros and cons. Waterfall is linear, delivers outputs, nouns, things that can be measured. Agile, on the other hand, is iterative, focusing on delivering working software as per the Agile Manifesto, right? So when we think about Wagile, it's the evolution, it's the combination. We're going from waterfall trends to agile trends, and now it's going to be all about hybrid or Wagile, in my opinion. When Dave and I talk about Wagile, we're not telling you what to do, we're not telling you how to do it. What we're saying is stop and think strategically about what it is you're trying to accomplish. What is best for your organization, your team, and your project. So let me give you a quick example of how we as consultants use an organization. Oftentimes a salesman hands me an SOW, and he says, this is what you're going to do with this client. And we show up for the kickoff meeting, and the client says, oh, we're agile. Now they signed this contract. So we as consultants we need to align with our client's needs. So we start iterating, but we keep our focus on the overarching milestones, the outputs that are identified. The client is expected to sign off on a proof of execution, usually monthly. And if they're unable to do that, that's when we step in and we say we need to write a change request, right? Most of our contracts are time and materials, or not to exceed time and materials more specifically. Okay, this slide is a little grayed out here, but this slide Dave had picked out of the PMI. Now most of us that have been project managers for a bit took our PMP maybe 10 or more years ago. Think of the PMBOK as strictly predictive or waterfall. That's not true. This came right out of there. There's three forms: predictive, waterfall or traditional extremists live. And on the right is adaptive, which is synonymous with agile. And that's where the agilists, the agile extremists live. Now the people who won't leave that side, I call them dogmatists. So we need to stay relevant, and Dave's going to talk more about this. We need to stay relevant and focused on what's going to move us forward. And we can't just live on the sides. We have to stay in the middle. So let's talk about what hybrid looks like. The scope is partially defined, right? We kind of know what we're going to do. We have a beginning and end, some milestones, but we leave opportunity to bring in customer feedback in the middle. Change control. Similar to what I talked about in my SOW example, we write change requests when it's appropriate. We don't write change requests for button color change. Or if they're building a house, as some of you might be in construction, we're not going to do it if the customer wants to change the color of the walls, right? We're gonna do it when it's appropriate, so we're not stuck on being uninventive. Costs. Obviously, if the customer wants new tiles and they're now marble instead of ceramic, or whatever it is that they want, we'll have to keep an eye on the overarching costs. Planning. We are planning up front. We have a business requirements document, but we leave opportunity for customer feedback. Outputs and outcomes. We want to focus on the outputs, which are things, and the outcomes, which are customer satisfaction. In Waterfall, we often focus on managing customer expectations, but that's not the same as customer satisfaction. So, which approach is best? Well, I'm a consultant, so it depends. Whatever my customer wants is what I do. But as a human being, I think, why not both? How can we combine the views? I borrowed this slide from John Tanner from C4G, with his permission. We want the middle. We want resilience and adaptability. When we look to the left, we have traditional standards and accountability of Waterfall, combined with the learning and improvement of Agile gives us resilience and adaptability. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here, so you're going to have to go with me on these parallels. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite shows, Naked and Afraid. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Naked and Afraid, typically two strangers are dropped in a very harsh environment and expect to survive for 21 days. They're given some basic resources, a pot to boil water typically, and something to start fire. Okay, so that's what I think of as the governance and standards or the strategic governance models of Waterfall. They have guidelines. They're given a map. They have to make it to their first milestone, which is typically a place where they can get water and shelter of some sort for the first night. That's their first milestone to get there. So in a recent episode, I had a man from Kentucky who brought a big knife. This was one personal item. And a woman, so this is the teaming part, right? The flexible teaming modes. And a woman from Southern California who brought a roll of duct tape. So you can imagine this immediate need for them to pivot or persevere, for them to begin working together to survive. And he was like, what is wrong with this lady bringing duct tape? So they were dropped in a desert, and the stones in the desert were 120 degrees. There were blisters on their feet immediately. So that's going to really impede them in that 21-day survival. So she used the duct tape and some bark to make them some shoes. So they make it to their first milestone. This is their first teaming exercise, their pivot or persevere. So they get to their first milestone. They find a cave, and they're going to stay in this cave for the next 21 days. But the only problem is they're not the only inhabitants of that cave. So now they have to make a choice. They can leave the show. They can stay in the cave with the poisonous spiders, or they have to be creative and innovative and adapt to the situation. So what they ended up doing in this episode is they built some sticks and they smoked out the spiders and kind of burnt them out of the cave and then went and sleep for the night. But this is where they made it to the first milestone. That's the waterfall part, right? But the adaptive, the creativity, the continuous improvement, that's all about the team. So when we talk about hybrid project management, we're having the strategy with the flexibility of the team. We've often been accused in the waterfall of stifling creativity, right? But on the agile side, when we talk about pivot and persevere, by show of hands, how many of you have written like 100 user stories, only for the product owner to show up and say, nah, we don't want that, right? So now we pivot and persevere. We're doing it so many times that sometimes agile could be a little exhausting. And often we lose focus on what it was the customer wanted in the first place, because in true Scrum, the customer is paying for the team, right? So moving down the center here for a minute, we want to pivot strategically, not every 2 weeks just because we had a lesson learned. We want resilience and adaptability. I touched on that. Stable governance model with the flexible teaming, allowing the team to make decisions. Predictable value outcomes is actually one of my favorites. I think we need to have that strategy that we're going to make it to 21 days, and here's our goals in the 21 days. But how we get there, that's where the continuous improvement and adaptive innovation comes into play. So we adapt and innovate, but when it's appropriate. So when we talk about adaptive innovation, the team has some great ideas. They're allowed to take a bottom-up approach, right? But staying in the confines of the organization. Adaptive innovation. Hey.
All right, so let's talk about some of the benefits of going hybrid. So before I show some specific benefits, just digest the pictures. Basically, we have a team over a bunch of tools. The main thing here is teamwork over framework, right? Frameworks don't deliver change. Teams and people deliver change, and they can be supported by frameworks. So let's go into some benefits here. So first up, we have agility. So this, what I'm getting at here is actually what's in the Agile Manifesto. So autonomy, empowerment, flexibility. This is actually enhanced if you are not bound to one strict approach. If you are flexible enough to adapt your approach, you are being more agile. You know, we see executives deciding that they're going to be agile. They want to be agile. So they communicate to all of their teams, well, you have to be agile. They pick a specific framework and tell all the teams, this is what you're doing now. And then down the line, they find out that that framework they picked wasn't a good fit for a lot of those teams, and they end up resenting agile, which is a little bit where we are right now in some cases. Leadership confidence, this is another one. If your leaders come to you and ask, why did you take a specific approach? And you say, well, because the guide said to. That's not going to go over well. You want to show that you can read a situation and come up with an appropriate response. That will instill confidence. Contractual governance compliance. So you might be forced to follow a certain agile approach, but that doesn't mean you also can't do long-term planning and come up with milestones. Or you might be forced to come up with a long-term plan. That doesn't also mean you can't insert agile principles or practices like daily stand-ups or lessons learned, frequent lessons learned. Principles. So when I mention principles, I'm talking about what is again in the Agile Manifesto. The manifesto talks about frequent communications, frequent deployments. They don't mention specific practices. So when we hear things like stand-ups, sprints, those don't exist in the Agile Manifesto. They are just talking about principles. Principles transfer from team to team better than practices do. Career growth. So when Barb was showing that chart, on the far left was waterfall and the far right was agile. You want to be able to do anything in that full spectrum, not pin yourself to one side. You will open up more career growth opportunities if you can manage anything. And then outputs and outcomes. So this is why we do projects in the first place. We are here to deliver. Your teams might not have the appetite, or it's not their role to take on an agile transformation. Let them focus on delivering. Okay, so I'm going to go through 3 case studies. It will be a lot. So if you have questions, I can take questions after the 3rd case study. So this first one, this is a situation where we have predictive, adaptive, hybrid. So think about situations when Agile is new to the team, or it might be new to the organization, but you want to get there. Or maybe there's a formal change management process that doesn't allow for frequent deployments. We do see that a lot. This specific team I'm talking about, they started off more predictive. They were doing, they had a 12-month roadmap that was required. They were doing requirements for each milestone on the roadmap. It took 2 to 3 months to do the requirements. That's a super long time. So they wanted to be Agile, and they started basically Agile in name only. So they were saying they were doing sprints. They weren't doing sprint planning. They were kind of doing stand-ups. They weren't doing them too well. So there was a lot of aspects of calling themselves Agile, but they weren't Agile. So when they were done with these requirements, which again took 2 to 3 months, they'd hand them off to the developers, and the developers would go around in a typical Agile cycle. A little bit of dev, a little test, a little feedback, and they'd go around and around until they were done, and they'd package it into a huge release. And they did 2 to 3 releases a year, and that was it. So they got more confident, they got more brave, experimental, they wanted to be more Agile. So we were continuously reviewing approaches, tools, requirements, and we started with those requirements, breaking them down into smaller components and handing those components to the developers. We got better at writing user stories, we got better at sprint planning, we started using definition of done, acceptance criteria, some of the things we've all been hearing about during this summit. Then the developers got better at standardizing designs, doing automated testing. We built a dashboard that showed typical Agile metrics, velocity, burn down, cycle time, lead time, those things. They really started paying attention to it. They really started picking up speed. We started working with change management that was restrictive, and we started going with monthly releases because we started breaking those requirements down into those small components and pushing them forward when they were ready. We did metrics to measure how often we were moving to production, and we ended up successfully moving MVPs, minimal viable product, to production every 2 weeks, every sprint. And we did frequent lessons learned, whether it was formal, informal, didn't have to be called a retrospective, we just did it when it felt right. All right, I'm gonna go to the next one, try to power through. So this next one is predictive, adaptive, in parallel. All right, so this is a different situation where the team was Agile. They really loved it. They were actually doing weekly planning. They were very good at being an Agile team. They were very fast. They were moving things to production, doing daily planning. The problem was the rest of the organization didn't care. They weren't Agile. They weren't interested in it. They actually told the team, we don't care about this Agile stuff, just give us the deliverables. You can do it any way you want to do it. So how do we keep a team engaged and functioning in an Agile way when they are the only ones doing it? So basically Agile in a bubble. So we came up with a Kanban approach. The team is in orange. Everybody else in the whole organization is in blue at the bottom. So we came up with this Kanban board to show the flow of value from left to right. You can see the backlog. It is a tasty backlog, by the way. I started with gin and tonic, and I thought, I might as well go to hot dogs instead of spelling out gin and tonic. So the team had to manage their need to manage their flow and manage their own team in an Agile way, but still meet external needs for a timeline, right? Leaders want to see a timeline. So we had to overlay this Kanban view with a traditional calendar so that executives got what they needed and the team was able to manage their flow of value continuously straight through deployment. So what were some key considerations here? So Barb's going to touch on some of these. Culture first, right? So if your team is ready but the organization isn't, you have to be careful with how much you're going to take on. So we will get into some of how you can assess that. The team, this one was easy for me because the team wanted to be Agile. If your team isn't ready to be Agile, don't force it on them. slow change, incremental change to get the team to slowly get there. And remember, when I say there, being agile isn't the goal, delivering is the goal. Project criticality. So this project was responsible for huge amounts of revenue. We intentionally chose Kanban because it was not disruptive. I mentioned it before. Your team might not, and usually isn't, looking to take on an agile transformation for the whole organization. They just want to deliver. Metrics. Choose your metrics carefully. If your external stakeholders or internal stakeholders don't want to be agile, don't give them agile metrics. They won't understand them. They don't want them. They will always want an understanding of value being added, how long something is going to take to be added, how much something costs. Those are the metrics that you will still have to produce. All right, so I'm going to go to the last one. This is a little different. This team was actually shifting from agile to more predictive, which is a little different, but I think it's a little more common than you think. Think about, here, I'll show the picture. Think about working with marketing or training, right? Those teams don't want to be inserted into your stand-ups. They don't have the time, capacity, or interest. They want to know everything and then go away and do their strategy. So if you know you are eventually going to be working your way towards the right-hand side of this picture where it's predictive, plan it out in advance. So stakeholder matrix, communications, resource plans, all of this is impacted as you shift to the right. Don't wait until you're getting there to figure out who your stakeholders are or how you're communicating to them, when you're communicating to them, how often, who's doing it. All of these things should be mapped out in advance. Change management is another one. On the left, it is super easy. This is the agile world. On the right, it's super hard. A change on the right-hand side of this picture would be very impactful to the project. Figure out in advance, again, how are you going to manage this? And then risks and issues is similar. Okay, so basically the key point here is, Barb and I can't tell you if situation A happens, do response B. We can't do that. This is not a new framework. This is you being confident and trusting your fundamentals of project management. So engagement, build psychological safety, break down the barriers, be a proponent for your team, do all of the things that you learned that aren't framework specific that can help you regardless of what the framework is. That was a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so 5 minutes, our lovely volunteer here, Vanna White, is going to be handing the microphone around if you have any questions at this point. Is there anybody have questions for Dave? Please from the middle.
Yeah, so my question is, what do you recommend as being like the first step, right, so let me give some context here. So we're a little more predictive, however, we notice, the necessary iterations that need to happen. What do you think is like an actionable thing that we could start right now that would kind of get us on a path, right, to get more agile?
I would always recommend openly talking with your team, giving them some options and letting them decide, because you're not telling them. We should not be telling people how to manage how they are getting their work done. The team should be deciding. So talk with them. Tell them, hey, do you guys want to have a stand-up a couple days a week and then maybe get to every day? Do you want to try to break the work down a little bit and maybe start with a month-long sprint and see if you can get it smaller? But give them options, and you could start with something as easy as, hey, let's do some lessons learned. And in the agile world, they're called retrospectives. It's fine, it doesn't matter. You can call them whatever you want. But yeah, just start and openly talk with your team and let them actually guide the way.
Great, thank you.
We have time for one more question at this juncture, and then we're going to keep going and have a little bit of questions. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
One moment, please.
So I work in a non-IT project management space. We're doing a capital project and we're kind of doing something like Wagile right now. one of the big challenges that I'm looking at right now is the increased amount of meetings. So we are still kind of like, we have all these, oh, let's do the sprint stand-up and everything, but we also have to like give stakeholder reporting in our traditional sense, gate 1 checking, gate 2 checking, and everything. So what have you guys experienced, or what have you guys learned by doing Wagile to reduce these kind of meetings and keep teams more productive?
Okay, my short answer is, if your meeting doesn't have an agenda, don't have it. Short answer. Dave?
Yeah, again, a lot of that impression of having so many meetings taking so much time is because that is a reality a lot of times when people are strict to a framework that is telling you you have to have these meetings. If you're not getting value out of the meetings, you should not be having them.
Yeah.
You can try your best at making them meaningful and valuable, and that's great if it actually happens. If it doesn't happen, back away.
Yeah. And a stand-up is not required to be 15 minutes. If everybody's done in 5, have a nice day. Right? Okay, ready to move on? Is this okay? Thank you, Dave. Okay. So to this point, we've talked about what Wagile is, how to get some synergies, the benefits, and Dave has kindly shared a number of case studies, different scenarios. I'm going to talk about something called agile suitability filters. And there's a ton of them out there, right? So agile suitability filters essentially help you decide if you want to be waterfall, agile, or hybrid. And what they do is they bridge the gap between theory and the reality. They help you create visualizations of your project and your organization so that you can identify the interplay between different parts of your organization that may prevent you from being agile. And ultimately, by having this visualization, it creates a tangible item that everybody can look at to discuss, to debate, a common language, a common framework for discussing, debating, and ultimately making decisions that are appropriate for your organizational culture, your project, and your team. So let's take a little closer look at one of these. The one I'm going to take a little bit closer look at is the model for suitability of agile approach. And the reason I chose this one is because this is a collaboration that was maybe done 10, 20 years ago by PMI and the Agile Alliance. And those are the two biggest organizations in my mind of project management, and that's open for debate. But once those two got together, this is where we want to be, in my opinion. So essentially, this agile suitability filter is a survey. Think about everybody that's in your RACI. Anybody that will be in your RACI, the team, the product owners, anybody, management, executives, you're going to give them a survey in which they're rating these different areas 1 to 10. And in the appendix of this, I give an example of some types of questions. You could also probably put this in the new PMI Infinity and come up with some questions. Basically, you're sending out a survey, and you're going to map that survey on a radar chart. And I don't want to get too much into this. It's a very short presentation. I could probably do a whole presentation just on this. But when you get numbers that are more towards the center, smaller numbers from your survey, you're going to be thinking more along the lines of agile. And the big numbers mean waterfall, and somewhere in the middle means you need to be hybrid. And so this is where you have the visualization. You take the survey, and everybody can talk about it. When you think about culture, does management support agile? Dave gives some examples where just the team kind of working in a box, right? The team autonomy and trust. Does a team trust management and vice versa? Is there collaboration between the two? The team itself, I've talked to some of you, and some of you are having stand-ups with 100 people. Well, I'm sorry to say that's not agile. Okay, so typical agile teams are 5 to 9 people, right? It could be more, and we also want to talk about team experience. Are they agile curious, or have you done a full agile transformation? Access to the product owner. And I've changed my mind in doing this specific question several times, because in my recent experience, there's been organizations, companies that have wiped out complete Scrum Masters. Every single Scrum Master, they were in a bank recently, wiped out 100 Scrum Masters, the whole group's gone. So now the burden shifts to the team itself, typically the engineers or maybe a BA on the team, and the product owners are being stretched like taffy. So do they have access to the product owner to help them make decisions? That's key. And at all different levels, there might be different opinions. So I feel that's important. The project itself, how big of a change is this? Is it critical? A 1 in criticality means it's life or death, or maybe it's a new drug on the market. Delivery, can this project be broken down into chunks? Because maybe, in like the example Dave gave, maybe we could build up requirements, and we have specific requirements, government contracts, FDA. I'm sure you guys have your own ideas, but can it be broken down? Or are there specific deliverables and dates that we can't miss? And I did a little bit, this is a little bit tangent, but I did a little bit of grant writing, and it's very specific. There's no tangents there, right? I keep wanting to get that. Okay. Okay. So overcoming challenges. There's no guide. So Dave and I gave this presentation to our internal teams, and they said, can we shadow you? Can you mentor us, some of the junior PMs? And we're like, sorry, it's not, we're consultants, we can't do that. But you have the PMBOK, and I had to change the slide. I had PMI Standards Plus, and I love that. I think it's a great tool. But I kind of like, well, if I put that up there, and everybody's gonna be like, well, what about PMI Infinity? So there's 3 things: PMBOK, PMI Standards Plus, maybe projectmanager.com, and PMI Infinity. Start small and experiment. Everybody loves an experiment, no matter what methodology you're using. The term experiment's kind of fun, and everybody's willing to give it a go. Focuses on principles over structured framework. I know I had 3 areas there, but most organizations want to focus on the organizational culture. It's very hard to be from the team up. We want that, but it's hard. Wagile and waterfall and agile purists. Yeah. So be open. We need to adapt. The whole time we've been here, we're hearing about AI and emerging and overcoming. If you want to stay in this business, you have to adapt. There's no not adapting. There's no purists anymore, in my opinion. Please beat me up later. Use experiments once again. That helps you work through any issues. Governance. This is kind of the opposite of no guide. It's having too much guide. Avoid agile in name only. Work within your organizational constraints. Give your PMO, if you're doing Scrum, you still have to give your PMO the metrics that they need to make decisions. I was recently at Agile 2024, and I met a young woman at Lean Coffee, as most of you would, and she was like, I'm doing Scrum, but my manager doesn't want to hear what I have to say. And after talking to her, what she was really communicating is that they were missing a team member, a QA tester that they needed full-time on the team. But her metrics weren't showing that. She was showing, error rates and, story points and what they were accomplishing. But what she needed to do was to go to an old-fashioned grade log, right? And so she just didn't have that experience. And that was a conversation that she and I had later. But I don't know if she did it or not. So really what we want you to do is think. We're asking you to think. Figure out what works. Don't be afraid to be bold. Embrace Wagile ways of working. Recognize the spectrum of approaches. Refer to the PMBOK, refer to PMI Standards Plus, refer to PMI Infinity. I did sign up to be a volunteer tester for that. I think it's so cool. I'm really into AI. Just ask me. Okay, there's our QR if you want to continue the conversation. Our LinkedIn QR. I would kindly ask you, in the app, there's a place for a survey. Please complete the surveys. I've been in a lot of sessions where people haven't asked that, but we do enjoy doing this and we want to come back. So, questions, Q&A. Nobody? Doug? Questions? Just kidding, Doug, just kidding. We had drinks with Doug last night. So, anybody have any questions? Yes, please. Would you get a microphone, please?
In case study number 2, how did you connect the Kanban work with the overall predicted timeline?
Yeah, so it's a little known tool called Excel. So we actually did that. We actually, the reason we picked Excel instead of a fancy software is because leaders like Excel and you can send it in emails and you just have to use what they want. So it was easy. We just created columns and showed the work in an Excel spreadsheet going from left to right with the months added in. So it worked. It actually went over really well.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate you. Those of you who
Hello. I have two questions. One, do you suggest any project management tools to have this hybrid model to manage projects? Because if you go into any major project management tools, either they are in agile or in waterfall. There is no hybrid project management tool that we can use in the market. So if you know anything. The second question was on the estimation techniques, right? So we have a different estimation techniques when we go for waterfall, when we go for agile. So when we do this hybrid, so what estimation techniques? I was expecting some inputs there in the session.
I can take the first part. Personally, my client uses ADO, and we have our typical Scrum or Kanban board to do and done with their flavor of it. And I write reports. So I use the report tool to develop dashboards. Dave?
Yeah, and as far as the first question goes, hybrid project management is extremely popular, whether it's called hybrid or not. It's PwC did a study, and I think it was out of Australia, where they found that hybrid project management is the only framework that's growing. It's not a framework, but the only approach that's growing. Okay, so some frameworks that are popular in the Agile world are extremely strict, and if you don't do them exactly the way they're spelled out, you are not doing that framework. You are actually doing hybrid. So it's extremely popular whether you realize it or not. We're just saying embrace it. Oh, estimation. I forgot the estimation piece. So estimate the way that makes sense for that project. There is no one estimation method that works in all cases. That's the practices I was mentioning. So story points have been popular, they're decreasing in popularity. Estimate just the way that your team prefers to estimate. Don't force an estimating technique on them, because every project is different. We can't tell you how to do estimates. Every project is different. It might work for you one way, points, t-shirt sizing might work for someone else. I've found success avoiding t-shirt sizing and points and just sizing the work to fit within a sprint and trusting your team that they know the amount they can take on.
Next question. Sorry.
How do you best communicate to the leadership at your organization that your hybrid approach is not just a confused approach, that you're doing this deliberately?
That's exactly what I was going to ask. How do I sell this to my management? Even though we do that, we are scrummish. We call it scrummish. We don't call it agile.
Well, then you're already doing it.
Yeah, but they keep pushing us and saying, okay,
Pushing you which direction?
Scrum, because that's what they want to do, and keep reminding us, don't go waterfall. So I had exactly the same question, like how do I sell this to my management that this works? Trust me.
Show them you can look it up and you can Google it.
PMI Infinity.
Or ask PMI. Scrum is for specific situations. It's for complex situations. It is not meant to be used across the board. Leadership doesn't understand that yet, but they are getting there because we are seeing a lot of Scrum declining in popularity. So if you look at the last line of the Scrum Guide, that would be educational to your leadership. If you're not doing exactly what the Scrum Guide says, you are not doing Scrum by definition, and it says that in the guide. So you're actually doing hybrid if you don't do everything that's in the Scrum Guide.
And do you
So we need to bring this to a close, I'm sorry. But we will stay for questions afterwards. We need to bring this to a close. I just got bored. Do we have time for one more? One more question, sorry. We'll talk more in detail.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
You talked about the main goal being deliverables, not the processes. What are some signs and symptoms that you've seen along the way to the deliverable that shows you're on the right path of a hybrid that's working for the team?
As a consultant, honestly, a consultant, I'm all about the money. Have we hit our milestones that are aligned with the dollars that we have allocated? That's for me as a consultant, but I'm not in your seat internally. But even internal projects often have budgets. So am I meeting the strategic goals of the project? And if not, then I need to be writing change requests. That's mine. But I do my best not to go there if I don't have to.
Well, team engagement also, I would say. If your team is enjoying it and they're seeing the value, I would keep going, right? So if your team is frustrated with your approach, that's a bad sign. If they are getting there and you keep talking with them about different approaches and different practices and they're embracing it, that's a good sign.
And I'd add to that, if you're doing Scrum, what I'm seeing as a trend in the industry is having the engineers take on more of the Scrum role. That way they kind of own it. Engineers, BAs, actual team members, because that way they're actually owning the work that they commit to, as opposed to you telling them, they're telling themselves, oh, we did this. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's one thing I find.
Did you do the risk assessment? So you are doing both.